Hey y'all, today of course it's Matt Rogers on the Honorable Mention podcast. I have a familiar face on the show, Spivey from the Philadelphia Tribune, who'll be in the locker room tomorrow night after, win, lose or draw after the Bills game. Is always around the team, always around all of the teams in the Philadelphia area, OJ. But I think we'll get back to the Eagles. First off, however, we talked about some comments from present day, modern, fresh comments from about a week ago, where a reporter basically said, "Hey, I feel licensed to." Basically just paraphrase what I think that an individual player said, but let me not paraphrase it. Let me get to the quote and then I'll ask you. The individual said, I would make up the report sometimes because the coach wouldn't come out at halftime or it was too late. And I was like, I didn't want to screw up the report. So I was like, I'm just going to make this up. From where you came from, tell a little bit about that. And then, how does that comment come off to you?
Well, first thing, Matt, is I was a sideline reporter. I cut my teeth being a sideline reporter for semi-pro football here in Philadelphia. So you talk about a tough job, and it's problematic for a number of things. Let me just take you back to like when I did that, and I interned doing that, so I wasn't paid. So what you do is you work with a producer, you work with the people. You're basically the bridge on the field from the to the broadcasters. So you're giving them insight of what's going on the field. So obviously, the broadcasters they don't have feet on the ground. You're their feet on the ground. They don't know what's going on. For example, you'll see a couple of times this year, the best of friends, AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts, going through different things where it appears that they might be arguing, but it's just heat of battle and everything. We already went through that. They're best of friends. Hurts is the godfather of AJ Brown's child. So, it's just all in the heat of battle. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's no different than the scene we saw on Lean On Me with Robert Guillaume and Morgan Freeman talking about, HNIC, they're arguing. Then at the end of the day, let's go get something to eat, right?
Yes, so, exactly.
That's all that is, right? But that's just one example of just many things, or whether it be an injury, whether it be what's the climate on the field. So you're a bridge.
Yes.
So to make that up, there's so much prep that has to go into being a sideline reporter. And also keeping in mind that neither the coach or the players really want to talk to you. So that gives you you have to
create that rapport, that camaraderie to get a quote like that.
Right. And that's where trust comes into play. Very, very, very
that's
much.
Built.
Right.
That's built and earned.
That's built over time. Because whether you're male, female, and especially female, and we'll get back to that in a moment, trust is key. Because for one, they don't want to talk to the males. So, and when you're in that climate of testosterone, misogyny, naturally, all those things, it has to be that much more difficult for a female. And I'll get to it being a black female as well, because I know so many black women sideline reporters. But it's problematic. And just going back overall, just with the media, just with journalism, and this too, Matt, and this day and age of social media, this day and age of misinformation and everything, whether it be from a sports standpoint, from a political standpoint, misinformation is just so problematic across the board. So for her to go on and say that, not only say that, but be comfortable in her space and her skin to say that is even more problematic, because obviously she said it with her chest. She knew she wasn't going to get reprimanded for it. And obviously it's been a couple weeks since. No word from her employer's Fox. No word from her other employer, Amazon. No word from the NFL, of course. Not that we would ever, hear anything from the Shield. That's a whole nother thing. But It's very problematic. But what I loved and what I uh, appreciate is that all the other sideline reporters across the board, whether it be Lisa Salters, Laura Oakman, all black, white, whoever,
Yeah.
they spoke out against it. They dug into her, which was very, very important. And like for one, Lisa Salter, she's she's a local person. She grew up in King of Prussia, right outside of Philly. So
Okay.
I followed her for like a long time with the Penn State and everything. But for her to come out and denounce that, it was a slap in the face to the craft. It's a slap in the face also to coaches and players. Like I said, it's already tough to get quotes,
Yes.
to get
Yes.
these athletes and coaches to want to talk to you, period. So that doesn't
Because
help
they're
anything to
operating in
rise
a
above it.
minefield, and you brought it up
Exactly.
earlier, misinformation. I mean, I think importantly, a lot of parts of our lives are political in different kind of ways. There's a politics to the locker room and being a coach, being a scout, being
Absolutely.
whatever within the room, because people let you in on information, let you in on their real feelings on things based on their trust and their ability to know that, okay, they have the wherewithal to understand what should be let out. Like if you're going and making up a quote that gets said at the start of the second half, where you're kind of throwing the offense under the bus, the defense under the bus in any kind of way, you got to leave that to the principal. And so that's just my thought on that.
And even off the field, from a journalism standpoint, I believe I told you the story several years ago, when I had to interview Dr. J, and this was, he's coaching the Big Three tournament. Ice Cube's conglomerate.
Yes.
So Doc wasn't available. I came to find out after the fact that Dr. J doesn't make himself available after games at the press conferences, where usually, you're in the room, you're waiting for the head coach, you're waiting for, a player or two for the PR to bring them out. So I had to scramble to get a quote. And like, can you imagine if that night I didn't get a quote from Dr. J and I had to make that up?
And then you attribute something to Dr. J. Wow. That's
It,
risk.
Exactly. And was that last month or early this month? I participated in a career day at one of the local schools here in Philadelphia. And, I went over with them as far as, my career, my journey, within journalism, media, so forth. And one of the biggest things I told them was to be authentic. You have to be authentic. And not only that, but whatever you do. But it was just very problematic. And what I didn't like the most was she said it with her chest, just
Yeah.
sat all uncomfortably in her white privilege, and nobody in her said employers said anything. And I think it would have been a solid also had coaches or players said something. Because I mean,
Yeah.
she's on a set with Richard Sherman on Thursday nights. She's on a set with Michael Vick on Sunday mornings.
Journalism is becoming elastic. That's the
Right.
point I think you're getting at, is like, at what point does this just become, fake prognostication and just extrapolation of what people believe to be true? Like, at what point does that not get called journalism? Like, how is
Yeah.
that journalism?
Yeah, it's scary. And from what we're all struggling with now, with how we get our information out through social media, like the back and forth. Okay, are we going to go away from what used to be called Twitter? I refuse to call it X. And over to
Yeah.
Threads versus so and so. And I'm trying to get a following on Threads, which is difficult because of what has happened with Twitter. I mean, I gained most of my following through Twitter,
Yes.
and
Yes.
getting my stories read, getting
People
my
know about
stories
that.
like reposted and everything, and
Yeah.
trying to get another following, not only
Yes.
gain another following. That's not really important to me. The importance is how can I get my information out? How can I get
Yes,
my
exactly.
stories read, my stories not only published on site and in the newspaper that I work for, but to get people
Yes, picked
to
up
find a
other
medium,
places. Yep.
a sub medium to get them read. Because I
Right.
mean, most people nowadays aren't going to, buy a print newspaper anymore. They're
Right.
going to look online, and it's also problematic. And I'll say this lastly, it's also problematic because you have these what do you call it? These faux um, accounts, these faux Twitter
Yes.
accounts, where these
Hmm.
guys are verified reporters, but they don't actually work for any publication, and they're either making something up, people run with it, which is the most scary thing, not
Yep.
calling out and people run with it, or
Right.
they're just quoting another journalist. They're quoting another um, article from a journalist, and they frame it to the point where it looks like their own.
Yes.
So this kind of
They
opens
hold
up
the
the door to
mirror
people.
up and shine the light in the right direction, and anything
Right.
could look like anything. So a nice little
Yeah.
magic trick that people get to pull on folks these
Yeah.
days
And
with the
any Joe
website
Blow
formerly
can,
known as Twitter.
right. Any Joe Blow can make a Twitter account and say, okay, ABC NFL expert. You know what I mean? Or
Right.
ABC NFL insider.
And,
And they're putting out this information.
inside sources say that
Right.
Ezekiel
Source.
Elliott
Yeah.
will be the Eagles' starting running back next season.
Exactly. And then, the current thing now is Shaq Leonard, Darius Leonard, who was just cut by the Colts. And everybody believes that he's going to be signed by the Eagles, whether they have any inside information or sources or not. And, people put that out there and fans run with it.
Right.
Fans
Because
who
they
don't
love their
know,
teams, like the
they love
DeAndre
their
Hopkins
team.
thing.
Right. They're the tunnel vision of of the fandom, and they just love their team. Or say, oh yeah, and they'll retweet it, and then their friends retweet it, and then
Next thing you know, it's got 2,000 retweets, and it's not true at all. It doesn't make it any more true.
Right.
The moment
And
it
it
was
just
put
goes
up.
back to just making something up. So, it's when no, I've never been, and I never will be a one of them journalism snobs where we're journalists and you're here. I'll never
Right.
be one of those people.
Clearly.
But we all lose when misinformation of any kind
Right.
is out there. And I don't care whether it's sports, whether it's politics, whether it's history, which I jump in often, as you see,
Yes.
when misinformation on history or even my city, even our city, man.
That's right.
Philadelphia. I mean, we have a rich, good, bad, ugly, and tumultuous history. And a lot of it that I've lived, being that I'm on the other side of 50 now, a lot of it I've lived. So when I go back and think someone puts out there, I have to correct it. And I don't even like getting into Twitter beefs or anything like that. But if I know what I know, I'm going to put it out there.
That's what we're supposed to do with it. We're supposed to get better, accumulate knowledge, and act on it. You can't change the past, but you can change the future and how you interact with it. So it's just a little something on that. Another quote on the brighter side that you liked. I could tell that it meant something to you. That Jalen was talking to. He said. Joe Buck said the other day about Jalen Hurts. I remember Troy Aikman talking to Jalen about Nick Saban and what he learned from Saban. He stopped Jalen Hurts, stopped Troy Aikman and said, I learned all that stuff from my dad. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that was so important. And just to give a little backstory to those who, didn't see the quote or didn't hear the podcast where it originated. It's the sports media podcast, something I listen to all the time. The host is Richard Deitch. He's an excellent writer for The Athletic, formerly Sports Illustrated, but he does a sports media podcast every week, and he has different guests on there. And he happened to have Joe Buck as his guest. And Joe Buck just kind of took Richard into the production meetings. Of course, every week, whoever the broadcasters are for the games, they meet with them. I forget what day it is during the week, but I guess once they come in town, they have a production meeting, maybe that day before, 2 days before. And, he didn't even mention what game this was. This could have been last year. I'm not sure. But he didn't specify. But that was so important for him to make that quote because, again, there's always a perception. Again, we go back to misinformation, and
Right.
how we as media, we as fans hold these college coaches in such high regard.
Right.
Like they are the creme de la
Like Nick,
creme.
yes.
Right.
Like Nick
Right.
Saban and Bill Belichick are in the same conversation.
Right. And any other college coach that, you can mention, whether it be a Lincoln Riley, whether it be a Kirby Smart, or, we go back to the legends of college basketball, Coach K, Bobby Knight, so forth. And, there's this misperception, especially when it comes to Black players. There's this misperception that, okay, because a great amount of them have come from single parent homes, that these coaches automatically become their father figures. And in many aspects, they do. I'm not going to dispute that. But there's a couple things. But when you have someone like a Jalen Hurts, who clearly has had a 2-parent home, both his parents active in their lives. And I wrote about this back in February, and I mentioned that too this week because that's important to marry both subjects together.
Yes.
That fathers, Black fathers, and everything are always under scrutiny.
Yes.
Right, ostracized, under scrutiny, and everything. And it was important for not only Jalen to say that, but it was important to also share it because that struck with me. Because again, we always put guys like Nick Saban, and again, that's not anything against him personally.
No shade against him. Absolutely not.
Right. But, it was just critical.
There's an assumption. The problem is the assumption.
Right. There's an assumption that, these players, these athletes learn everything from their college coach, which is just not true.
Yeah.
And, I know he's a quarterback and, maybe he probably spends more time with the quarterbacks than any other player. I get that. But it was clear, and it was clear in the story that I wrote back in February on Super Bowl Sunday. For the Tribune, I wrote, Jalen Hurts, son of a coach. And I find it ironic because I wanted to write that story because everyone at the time was so overwhelmed, was so flabbergasted at Jalen Hurts' success of him not only going 14-3. Whoa, what is it?
That's right.
14-1.
Oh, yes, because Gardner
exactly
lost it.
So not only that, but in the way that he did it, and there was always a paper trail of Jalen not only being a winner, but Jalen being cool, calm, and collected, which is carried over to this year with them being 9-1.
That's right.
Losing only 2 games in 2 years so far, which is college. That only happens in college football, right?
It's ridiculous.
So yeah, it's ridiculous.
That type of winning is winning.
When you think about it. So, but there's a paper trail, and it goes back to his father, who not only birthed him, but was under his wing,
coached him up
since. Yep. His father coached him up.
Yes.
Learned everything from his dad. Just, I spoke about it verbatim in the story, how he was just always in his office, always being a sponge, always learning things. So it was important for Jalen to do that because he is also very cognizant of his narrative too. So
it's an important narrative in the world of sports because he's carrying, at this point, the Black quarterback. I mean, him and Mahomes, of course, there's no, slight to Mahomes or Lamar Jackson as well, but he's like kind of the quintessentially counted out black quarterback. Him and Lamar in the way, or like, change him to running back, or people even still saying he's still a running back. There's still way too much scrutiny of a guy, again, who's 23-2. I mean, what are we talking about? And I said this, and I've said this on this podcast, of course, in other places, that his passing statistics are grossly, deflated. I would say that in some ways the rushing touchdowns are as well. Not statistics, but his touchdown numbers. So people look at quarterback ratings a lot of time, and so he'll throw for the right amount of numbers, have a great completion percentage. But if they get within 2 or 3 yards, we're going to have America's favorite play. And so there's no Andy Reid shovel pass coming.
Or America's most hated play.
I don't know. If you polled the public, I probably think that most of the public actually likes it. It's just, is your team playing that Sunday? Because other teams do it. I want to get that out there. The truth is, other teams, they try to. They don't do it. And especially down at the goal line, like it's beyond automatic, because they're riding into like halfway into the end zone when they are pushed. It's unbelievable. So I would just say he's the quintessentially counted out guy. He's still got a path to go. He still needs to hoist a Lombardi. I think that we got a great rivalry cooking up here with the Chiefs and the Eagles. I think we'll see them again, and I think it'll be another good one.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say on that is, going back to the paper trail, and people dismissing it. But you talk about when quarterbacks are covered, and I'll say white quarterbacks because this is the majority. When white quarterbacks are covered, and the broadcasters, the media, they find out their dad was a coach, you don't hear the end of it.
No, you don't.
But when Jalen walks into NovaCare, he walks into the Eagles facility, and that's the narrative of him. Okay, yes, he was coached by Nick Saban, he was coached by Lincoln Riley, but he is the son of a coach. But just because they did not want to see, some people did not want to see Jalen or they couldn't fathom or foresee Jalen as being the franchise quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles, they immediately dismissed all of the pedigree of him being the son of a coach. But I bet, if that was still Carson Wentz or Tanner McKee, whoever you name, son of a coach, you wouldn't hear the end of it.
So Jalen, just for the record, Jalen Hurts has already surpassed Carson Wentz in terms of all-time Eagles quarterbacks, like by far.
I read
he had the 1 year, the MVP year, but Carson never played like that again. He played well, but he didn't play like that again. Jalen's playing like that again.
Matt, I read somebody posted, I think it was yesterday or the other day. They said, "Oh yeah, Carson Wentz legend." I'm like,
a legend, an Eagles legend for what? 4 seasons?
Yeah.
I mean, the guy started 2016, and by 2020, the COVID year, Jalen had taken his job.
Yeah.
He's stinking it up.
He allowed Jalen to take his job
against all odds, because the Eagles were bought in on. They gave him all the money. They had to eat the money to get rid of Carson.
Yeah,
Carson and Jalen forced the Eagles' hand for Jalen to become the Eagles quarterback. That's part of the story too.
There you go. And just one thing on Lamar as well. He had said something, and I believe it was in the Players Tribune, and he talks about his mom being his best coach. His mom coaching him up. And he talked about he didn't even want to play football. He didn't foresee himself as a football player, nonetheless an NFL player. And he made a specific, and this is why it's important that not only these athletes say their own words, but it's also important that we capture them. And that's also, I feel like that's my obligation. That's my responsibility as a Black journalist. Black man first, journalist second. But that's my responsibility as well. But Lamar said this. He said, I only play football because I'm from South Florida, and in South Florida, that's what you do as a young black kid. So that spoke volumes as well. So and I hope the people, when there are some black journalists in Baltimore too who cover the Ravens, I hope he's able to has some elaborate on that statement. So
yes. Okay, we'll go to a quick commercial break. All right, we're back. So you'll get a chance to ask Brandon Graham, unless lightning strikes and Mr. Graham isn't able to show up on the field tomorrow. He will break the franchise's record for most games played as an Eagle. When you get a chance to, if and when you get a chance to ask him a question, what are you going to get at with him and try to hear from him?
Well, probably what I will ask him, get the chance, and Brandon's locker is always the most frequented at the games. Whether he plays well or not, they always get a quote from Brandon Graham, and that says a lot about him too.
Yes,
and I think that
accountability.
I think that speaks a lot about his longevity and him breaking this record. And this was thought of as a record that maybe wouldn't be broken, especially in today's NFL, because the average play only lasts a little less than 4 years.
Yes.
But I would just ask him, what keeps him going, or what has kept him healthy for the most part. And I know he will say a lot of things, and I know he will be very straightforward. He'll probably just attest it to, just working hard and all those things. And he'll probably, be humble about it. But he also has a great circle around him as well. And we look back. I mean, you look back at his first couple years, and he wasn't really given a chance here in Philadelphia for the first 3-4 years of his career, right? Because everyone was looking at Jason Pierre-Paul. That's the first one that comes to mind. I knew there were a few other players that they could. How can I forget Earl Thomas?
Well, yeah. How could you forget Earl Thomas?
Yeah, so
great player.
But basically, Brandon has outlasted both of them. I don't think Pierre-Paul is signed on to a team yet this year. But
Pierre-Paul blew off a couple fingers, didn't he?
It was the accident he had a few years ago. Yeah. So yeah. But that just speaks to his longevity. But he's come a long way, and he'll forever be beloved for getting that strip sack on Tom Brady. And people have that framed in their game rooms, in their living
It'll
room,
never come down.
in their office.
It's never going to come down.
And I had asked him about it in that following preseason. I'd asked him what he was thinking, and does he realize the magnitude of what he did?
Right.
Because in my mind, there are a lot of plays. Everybody talks about the Philly special. Everybody talks about the last play, the Hail Mary that
that's the play
that fell down.
The strip sack is the play.
For me, that is the play, because as soon as that happened, it was almost like a shift. It was almost like a shift in my mind, a shift in my body. As a longtime Eagles fan, it was like, okay, this changes everything. And when I say everything, like everything, that one play, it secured it. And, and that's not to downplay the touchdown that Zach Ertz scored, which was probably equally as important. But that
so clutch too.
That put the ring on everybody's finger.
Mm-hmm.
That brought Eagles fans to the big kids table at Thanksgiving. Because what was a running joke every year? And they will always put up that meme. What was that?
Yes.
Super Bowl rings in the division. And,
zeros.
You see, Cowboys, Giants, now Commanders, and then Eagles with nothing on the shelf. Can't say that anymore. That was the lifelong joke
and it's a heavy ring too. To beat Tom Brady in his greatest game ever. Right. Tom Brady has never played better in a Super Bowl. He has won Super Bowls and played way worse than he played against us.
Even his comeback against Atlanta.
Right.
where he threw a
Throwing
pick six.
picks. Right. Right. on Tom Brady's best night, Nick
And
Foles got him.
here's a little nugget about that game too. That was the first time in Super Bowl history where a team who scored on a pick six lost the Super Bowl. It did not happen all the teams before then. If they scored a pick
Nice
six,
little nugget there. Wow.
they were undefeated. I forget what the number is. It was maybe 12-0 or something like that. But
wow,
that's how crazy that was. But for Brandon Graham to do that, he'll forever be beloved. He shouldn't have to pay for a meal ever. I say that along with Patrick Robinson too in the NFC Championship game when he ran back that interception. I mean, we probably can't pick out Patrick Robinson in the
but everybody remembers the play.
On the street, right? But everybody remembers the play. But he just needs to let himself know when he's back in town. But anyway,
that's right.
But
people will Google it though. It'd be like he shows up anywhere in Philly and be like, "I'm Patrick." If he really was to pull that card, it'd be like, "I'm Patrick Robinson. Google me," and then he doesn't pay for anything.
Yeah, well, Eagles fans will find out. They was like, because they're crazy about the third string long snapper, so they'll get an autograph from him. But yeah, I'll just ask Brandon about his longevity and just kind of reflecting back, and you have to kind of harness that because he's still in the middle of the season also. But him still getting good snaps. I'll even ask him about that. He's still getting good snaps, and I guess his 14th year. So, but I'll look forward to
impact plays.
Saying hi to him, right?
In the Cowboys game, impact plays.
Yep, exactly.
So Brian Johnson, of course, has received some, despite leading helping to lead the team to 9-1, is getting some stiff criticism. What would you give him in terms of a letter grade so far this season?
Yeah, I was contemplating this, Matt, and I've come up with an A-.
A-.
Just
okay.
Simply because of their record.
Okay.
You can't be an inept offense, which some people are claiming.
Right.
And
inept.
some people claim
That's
for
crazy.
aspiring, which I think is absolutely absurd. If you're 9-1 and back to put this in perspective, Matt. We know the 14-3 last year. Shane Steichen, who was an excellent play caller. And I heard very little criticism of Shane Steichen in his entire tenure here in Philadelphia before he moved on to Indianapolis.
Right.
But Brian Johnson, 9 games in, people want him fired. People say and let's not forget, and I'm gonna write about this. I believe there's some undertones there, because why? First of all, we're not used to seeing African American offensive coordinators, and there's the same undertones that we have been talking about for 30-40 years with black quarterbacks.
Yes.
So
they don't get it. They don't get it. They don't understand.
And even some of the questions where I think, from what I see, and this is just me, I can only speak for me, that where I think his intelligence is being insulted in some aspects. Because some of the questioning, and fans is one thing. Fans want to be fans. They want Doug fired, Doug Peterson fired. Sirianni's first year, they wanted him fired, especially after the flower thing, which we all thought was a little off. But I'll admit that.
I mean, who didn't? I mean, when he walked off the podium, he was like, "Man, what the hell was I talking about?"
Maybe he got that from Jalen. I don't know. But anyway,
it worked. It worked.
It certainly worked. Yeah, he's lost 2 regular season games since is when Jalen is the quarterback, I should say. But
yes.
I think there are some undertones there. I mean, has he made mistakes? Do I criticize him? Yes. There was one sequence, the one series in the Kansas City game, which we just saw, where they were deep in their own territory and, got a little crazy with the wide receiver screens and all of that. But I just think the criticism is just over the top. And again, it's not, the media is going to criticize in so many ways, but I just think the fans' criticism is just absurd. I mean, for him to be 9-1 and they haven't even played a complete game yet, and also playing a complete game, execution is a big factor in that too. So we can't lose sight of that as well. And you saw the execution in that first half. Like we had never seen the Eagles' offensive line get blown out of the water like that in the first half. That was what really concerned me, and that had nothing to do with Brian Johnson.
And I was frustrated with, and I was, that was the first time they had been back all together, and that was not a good performance. The Eagles' offensive line, if they would have lost that game, I would have looked at them as a unit and said, I would have looked back at the pick that AJ Brown was expecting Jalen to throw it hot, throw it deep. I would have said, hey, that miscommunication would have been it, and the offensive line.
Right, absolutely, yeah, because that was a critical play as well. That miscommunication there, which happens,
right.
But one thing I also saw, and the Eagles do this mic'd up thing that they put on their social media pages and YouTube and all of that, and you can hear, I think Jason Kelce was mic'd up, and I don't know if Brian Johnson was as well, but they showed a sequence with Brian Johnson talking to the offensive line and getting them together, keeping them together after that that shaky first half where they just looked horrible. And he talked to them one-on-one down the line. It's like, okay, we're good. We're gonna get this together. We are good. Stay focused. And that was big, I think, for not only for us in the media to see, that was big for the fans to see. Because again, I think there's some undertones that he maybe not be qualified. And I think that just goes back to
that when you walk in the room, I think the reality is when you walk in any room anywhere, there are some people, and if people don't want to accept that there are some people who are likely in the room who think this way. I don't want to, it's not going to be always all the rooms, but all of the people in the room. But when you walk in a room and you have certain level of melanin, there are going to be people who you have to prove just because of that, you have to prove your qualifications in a way that you wouldn't have to.
I feel that every time I walk into the press box. I feel that every time I walk into the post-game press box.
You have to justify yourself.
Yeah. And, I don't feel personally that I have to justify myself. I just feel sometimes even sitting next to certain guys in the press box or in the press room. And I will tell you, and I won't say on air because I don't want to put them out there and make them uncomfortable unnecessarily. But there are guys in the media who I have met who are outstanding guys. They're great guys. And they've welcomed me as, someone in the, someone in the press rooms. And this goes beyond. And again, there's only a few of us there of color. Myself, Chris Murray, who's one of my mentors, E.J. Smith with the Enquirer, Chris Franklin, all guys I think you've had on the show
absolutely.
for the most part. So other than those guys and maybe a couple guys on TV, that's it.
Yes.
I mean, you can throw maybe Deuces Rogers there or Don Bell, who, they work on they're sports anchors for television. But that's you can basically count on one hand the African American reporters that are in that press box, and there's no African American,
and there's no dearth of interest in the African American community.
Right.
I mean, it's not like you can only get your news from people who look like you. That's not at all what I'm saying, but it can be presented in a way that is going to be more appealing and enjoyable at times.
And there's certain things that some people will get or pick up
that's right.
Certain things that you see that the majority won't pick up, like last week, case in point. And another guy who I think I'm not going to tell you who you have on your show, but another good friend of mine, Anthony Gilbert, who he covers for the most part basketball, writer for Slam magazine. He reached out to me, and he reached out on Twitter because he noticed that Jalen Hurts had on a Malcolm X hat. And this may predate you, but back in '92 when Spike Lee did
the Denzel,
the Denzel Malcolm X movie, there was a lot of Malcolm X paraphernalia, and one of the signature things, apparel items, was a black Malcolm X hat, and it just said X. The logo, of the movie was just a X.
Yes, it was the X. Yes,
and Jalen wore that hat last week, which I haven't seen probably in almost 30 years.
And other people probably were like, "Is that Twitter?"
Yeah, no one else picked up on it, and I saw it. In fact, a black woman had picked up on it.
Okay.
One of my followers had picked up on it, and then Anthony reached out to me, and he asked me specifically, like, "Can you ask Jalen the backstory about wearing his hat? Like, is he cognizant? Is that a tribute?" And I said, you know what I said to him? I said, "We'll do. Although I'm sure at this point somebody will read this and they'll probably beat me to it." But Anthony's response was, "This is how we hold each other accountable as black journalists." He said to me, "Yes, but we both know that it wouldn't be understood the same way." Yeah. How the question would be asked, whoever else asked it wouldn't be the same.
No.
That's how he replied to me. And that's
you gotta beat people to it.
Right. And that's the accountability. And not just that, but we know in certain aspects, being asked a question from so and so.
Yes.
Being asked a question from, let's say, Bob from Bucks County is going to be a little different from OJ from West Philly asking a question.
Yes. Yes. Just a different perspective.
It absolutely, no doubt.
I wanted to. I was sketching over here, and I was thinking through. We're talking about the 23-2 in the last so many games in the regular season. We've talked about they've only lost 2 games. If you include the postseason in which they have lost 2 games, but you also would include the wins, they are 25-4 in the Sirianni Hurts era. 25-4.
That's stuff you see in college football. That's Ohio State-ish. That's Alabama. That's Georgia. That's unprecedented in pro football. Even the best teams over time. That's unprecedented. You could probably look back go way back to the 80s, like team of the 80s, like the 49ers. Did they lose 2 games in basically a 2-year span? Maybe not.
Even if you include the playoffs, to lose 4 games, 4 football games, 4 Sundays or Mondays or Thursdays, Eagles fans went home. Be like, we took the L home with us. We carried it.
Yeah.
All the other times, it's 25 dubs.
Yeah. And you can project. And I know they had this tough stretch. They beat KC, now Buffalo this Sunday, and then San Francisco and Dallas.
49ers in Dallas.
It's probably hard to project that they'll win all of these games, but you look, worst come to worst, they're probably going to be
1-2 in this 3-game stretch.
Yeah, they're probably
2-1.
They're probably going to end up 14-3 or 13-4 at the worst this year, and that still may be good enough for the number 1 seed. Especially
because you're going to have beat the Cowboys at least once. Probably have a better divisional record.
And if they beat San Francisco, the Dallas game may not matter as much. Right.
I hear I'm kind of jumping topics here, but I'm hearing talk of Goedert being back next week. Are you hearing some of that?
Yeah, there are some rumblings that Goedert could be back. And just for him to be on the injury report this week, and, they were kind of kind of like hydroplaning him through the injury report this week, and they just said,
Okay.
okay, he's out. But for them to just report that, to say, okay, he's just out this week, that gives you an indication that he could be ready.
They
The
ramping him
following
back
week.
up. Yeah.
Exactly. And just for him to not have to have surgery, that was remarkable in and of itself. But Eagles have done a great job, by the way, within the past couple seasons of getting their training staff right, getting the right team
Yes.
doctors and everything. Because remember, that was a big deal. It
With Carson
all
Wentz
these
era where
injuries.
everybody.
It seemed like everybody and their grandmother got hurt, got injured, and ended up on the injury list. Like a CVS receipt.
Yes.
But yeah, they've done a great job of securing their training staff, their medical staff, and those guys getting the best care. And I've been told on a number of occasions, and Nick Sirianni will say this every now and then too, that whatever the Eagles need for performance or anything like that, Jeffrey Lurie gets it for them. So
that's a smart move. It's having good results so far.
Yeah.
A little more injury news before we get into the some game picks for this week. Is Albert O time? Because Grant Calcaterra's out. Is it time for Albert O to start getting some catches, getting some playing time?
Well, I would think that they would activate him this week. I don't know how good he's going to be. I mean, he has had some flashes of being a pretty decent tight end, but they do need some production out of that. He's probably by default their best pass catcher on the roster right now, on the active roster.
As a tight end, yes.
Yeah,
as listed on the roster as a tight end. I would play Julio if you're just gonna just miss it back.
Yeah,
I'd just throw Julio at that.
But my thought was if they were going to do that, they were probably going to try to incorporate that last week. But I don't see that. I think they're probably just going to try to keep him in the slot. And it's going to be interesting what they do because Quez Watkins is scheduled to be back this week too. So I don't know whether fans want to see him or not.
He will be back.
He may. We probably won't know until an hour before game time. But they opened up the window for him to return. But we'll see. 5
wide with Julio and Zacchaeus. And
I don't know if I ever want to see 5 wide, but it's possible. It's
on the goal line. I mean, you do that quarterback draw.
As long as it's not a 5 wide receiver screen.
No. I have a heart attack. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, but you could do some things with every now and then, especially with the way that they run this quarterback run offense.
I do love what they did with getting DeAndre Swift in space, and like those counters and those misdirections, those reverses. I do love that. I want to see more of that for sure.
I got to check in on the on my tracker for DeAndre Swift now that you bring him up on my 100 yards. I think I think I said it was going to be 8 times this year. I got to check on that.
Well, he's still third in the league in rushing. I mean, as much as they say, oh yeah, when they're not running the ball, he's still third in the league in rushing.
That's impressive. When was the last time an Eagles running back was up there?
Probably had to go back to, Sanders had over 1,000 last year, but you probably had to go back to Shady.
You have to go back to Shady to talk about top 5 in rushing. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. So Avonte Maddox is appearing like he's kind of like the Reese Hoskins of this season. You hear rumblings that, hey guys, if we win one for the Gipper, if we get to the show, he might come back. And it could be I think Avonte Maddox in a certain way, especially Avonte, if you're listening, I think you're a bigger addition back to the team than Reese Hoskins could have been this year. We really, even if Reese Hoskins could have came back to the Phils this year, it'd have been an at-bat or 2 in the World Series. It could have been a momentum shift. It would have been really good for the fans in Philly to see it. But materially on the field, to get Avonte Maddox back would be a lot bigger infusion of talent, especially at a key position. Is that realistic? Do you think that they're kind of like trying to leave that out there hopefully as a hopeful kind of thing, or we really might see 29 back on the field?
My guess is, my hunch is, if you do see him, it probably wouldn't be until the playoffs, especially if they can get the number one seed. They open up that 21-day window, because I believe they didn't put him on injured reserve out for the year, correct?
No, they didn't.
Right. So maybe open up that 21-day window in December. Maybe towards week 17 or week 18,
okay.
right? And then give them a couple weeks to practice, get in shape. And it's probably, I think it's still a long shot in my opinion, but if so, it'll probably be in the playoffs. But I'm sure we as media will try to dig more into it, because just having them out there, and the way these teams are, especially against a team like San Francisco,
right?
You want to have that Avonte Maddox in the slot, going against a Debo, going against Ayuk, all those type of guys who can do a lot and cause a lot of problems, which the Eagles over time, not the past couple games, because they pretty much shut out their opponents in the second half, which is remarkable.
Yeah, it is.
When you think about that too. Two high-powered offenses. But they did have a little bit of a problem earlier on in the season with, the passing defense over the middle. Roby's looked good. We were all lucky that Watson had dropped.
Yes.
Valdez-Scantling dropped
yes.
that bomb.
It just felt like Quez with different jerseys on, though. It was it kind of in the Super Bowl was like, all right, y'all's turn. Feel that.
Yeah. and just a thing, just as far as just kind of take you in to what wide receivers are, and you really have to it's a difficult play when you're that wide open. But you have to decide, how you're going to sell out on that play. And it seemed obvious to me that Valdez-Scantling worried more about falling than he did catching the ball, seeing like where he is and all. And all he had to do was just catch it. And you just, like, you look on the opposite side when Jalen Ramsey had those two interceptions against, who did they play on Sunday?
When they threw the one Jets on the pit, not the Jets game. It was
when they played Las Vegas.
That pick before the half, he sold out on that. That was
right. The pick before the half, and even more so at the end of the game, because he basically just launched himself and just caught the ball, fell on it, got the wind knocked out of him. But that's kind of how you have to.
I just have to catch it. I don't have to score a touchdown.
Yeah, you just sell out and you just catch it and you just worry about everything. It's field position. You know what I mean? So
Jalen Ramsey's former team are the 2-point favorites at the Texans and with CJ Stroud. Who are you feeling in this one?
I like the Texans in this one.
Me too.
I think if it was in Jacksonville, I kind of maybe would have leaned toward the Jaguars. But the Jaguars are a perplexing team for me.
Yes.
Some weeks they look really good, and then other weeks it's like, they look kind of.
It's a CZ 7-3. It's a cubic zirconium. I'm not.
There you go. I like that. Yeah. But
I don't trust it.
I still don't know what to think of Trevor Lawrence. I really don't. I mean, are they winning because of him, or are they winning in spite of him? I mean, he's not terrible. And what was that? I think I saw a thing with Bomani Jones, and he was like, okay, Trevor Lawrence is just okay. He's one of them okay quarterbacks.
He is.
It's like, okay, he's not going to hurt you necessarily, but he's not going to necessarily win the game for you either.
Well, it's because he's not that fast anymore. I mean, compared to the college guys, he was just, he was able to make those kind of Jalen Hurts, plays. But these NFL defensive linemen, they're just catching him. And so he's not really excelling at that level from the pocket to do what he was doing in college. Is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I agree. But from what D'Amico Ryans is doing with that Houston club, and also CJ Stroud, who may just even get some MVP votes if they, they stay on
Oh my
stay
goodness,
on this
yes.
track. I mean, he's better. I thought he would be good because he reminds me of Jalen a lot. But I didn't think he would be this good as
Not
far
good.
as just not only passing football but throwing it downfield. And the rapport that he has with the young receiver Dell, the other the rookie wide receiver, they look like they're going to be good for quite a while. That's going to be like one of the great duos in the NFL we'll see for the next few years.
He's getting college open. He is cooking folks. I mean, when you look at some of these deep shots, when CJ is hitting him deep, I mean, Tank Dell's beating people by like 5 yards. It is. When you guys get a second, take YouTube it as you finish listening to this. Watch some of these touchdowns, these deep shots that Tank Dell is getting hit on. NFL receivers, other than like Deshaun Jackson and Tyreek Hill, don't get that open. Justin Jefferson, they don't get that open.
No, not at all. And it kind of reminds me of what we used to see with Marvin Harrison Sr.
Yes.
And you look back at a lot of his touchdowns, you're like, where's the defense? So, yeah, that was a good one.
It is. He is. Browns are underdogs at the Broncos. I guess Vegas is liking the resurgence of the Broncos, favoring them at home. Obviously, you usually customarily get the 3 points at home. They get the 1.5 at home. What are you thinking about the Browns game?
Yeah, I think also that's in Denver, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Denver is still a tough place to play. It has a great atmosphere. Kind of reminds you a little bit of Kansas City, with all the fans on top of you. And Denver's not necessarily winning because of their offense. They're winning because of their defense. Even though Russell Wilson and Cortland Sutton, they're having that similar rapport like Stroud and Dell now. They're finally trying to get that offense together, which has looked better. But I think I'm going to take the Browns there. Because even though Watson's out for the year, they're playing even better defense. Yes. And it's going to be tough for, like you just talked about, today's defensive linemen. And, Russell Wilson, he's not the Russell Wilson of 10 years ago where
Definitely
he could just,
not.
Scramble around for 30 seconds in the backfield, but you have
and you're not really embellishing. Some of those scrambles were incredibly long,
ridiculous. Yeah, and it was fun to watch, by the way. But you have somebody like a Myles Garrett who can run him down.
Yes.
And everybody was talking about, of course, this past week on Thanksgiving with Bland breaking a record for the pick sixes. Right now, if I had to choose, my defensive player of the year is Myles Garrett.
Yes, might be MVP. I mean, he's in that conversation for MVP in my book.
He should be. I mean, there's only been 2 defensive players ever named MVP ever.
I don't know if he'll win it, but he needs to be in the conversation.
He should be. But Myles Garrett he's that good, and like he's unbelievable disruptor. So I'm gonna take the Browns in that one.
Ravens, their division rivals, are 3.5-point favorites at the Chargers. Personally, I think the Ravens beat the Chargers by a lot more than that. I really think that the Chargers are, I did like Brandon Staley kind of standing up for himself at the podium the other day. I am a detractor. I do think that, his team figures out ways to muck it up. And so I think that the Chargers get beat by 10 tonight. What about you? Or not tonight. Whenever people listen to this. Against the Ravens, I think the Ravens are going to beat the Chargers by 10.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a closer game than that. I don't trust the Chargers at all. I don't trust Staley. I don't care what he says after the game or anything like that.
Nope. I liked it, but I still don't trust you.
But, he's always, comes off as the smartest guy in the room. And that's never a good thing when you portray yourself that way. And I do kind of feel for Herbert a little bit. And I know like all the media guys, and I remember a couple of years ago, a couple of them tried to, say, oh, you don't look at Jalen Hurts. Herbert is the guy, all that stuff. But
yes.
I do kind of feel bad for him now because his coaches, I just think is
just
incompetent. more times than not. But you got to watch this game for the Ravens because they have a tendency of putting up a stink bomb every now and then. And this might be one of those games, but I'll still take the Ravens in that one. But I think it'll be a lot closer than maybe a 10. Maybe I'm winning by 10.
The Ravens are saying that they are not expecting that Andrews is out for the season, especially should they be in playoff contention. And so we'll see. That will be a big factor in whether they can really go to Kansas City
these next couple of weeks. How is the offense going to operate without Andrews? Because that was definitely Lamar Jackson's safety blanket.
And then Beckham, I think, is questionable for the game. And so even if you play, you came in with the tag for a reason. Because NFL teams aren't, looking to overly, share with you, where somebody's hurting. So if you came in with the tag, you're getting Beckham at this age with the tag. He may play well, but again, it's a question mark.
Of course.
The Bills are 3-point underdogs in Philly, 425 for the game. A lot of people listen to this podcast to hear about. What are you thinking about this one?
Yeah, the spread on this one is a little bit surprising because they're just basically it's basically what you call a home pick'em because you normally just give the 3 unconsciously give the 3 to the home team, get a -3 to the home team just because they are home. I thought it would be a little bigger. I thought maybe it would be at least a 4, maybe 4.5 to 5. But people talk about the Eagles not yet playing a complete game. I think they play more of a complete game this week for the first time this season. And Josh Allen is going to give you a couple. That. Eagles just have to take advantage of it.
That's
and
right.
Even though Buffalo plays good defense, they are missing some guys. But I just believe that this is the game where the Eagles just break out and everybody will just be feeling good come Sunday night with San Francisco coming to town next week. And, we can talk about the 40 whiners for the next 7 games. But I think the Eagles win easily tomorrow.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I'm thinking Eagles 34, Bills 24. I think that I think you're right. Josh Allen's just always do, and the Eagles defenses do. The regression to the mean in terms of the turnover differential is going to swing back. Darius Slay is due for a big play here. And really, Stephon Diggs is a ticking time bomb right now. He's really getting pissed off with Josh Allen.
Yeah, he has one foot out the door. So I'm looking at more like maybe a 34-20 game, 34-23, something like that.
Great. OJ, is there anything we should look out for either right before the game or after the game? People listening to this next week.
As I mentioned before, I'm going to do a feature on Brian Johnson, how he is elevated, been promoted to this position, and how he is done, I think, a great job again for them to be 9-1. And, if they win on Sunday, that would make an even better story for me. I mean, he's jumping in big shoes. Everybody thought highly of Shane Steichen, but for him to hold the fort down and them to be 10-1 and not again playing a complete game yet, I think that says a lot. Of course you have to have talent. Talent can win you a lot of games, but it's also important that when you do have talent, that you don't screw it up. And that's whether you're a head coach or an assistant, you can't screw it up. So I'm going to do a story on Brian Johnson, and also I will be covering the first ever Big 5 Classic next Saturday. That's going to be here in Philadelphia at Wells Fargo Center. So you're going to have all the Big 5 teams, a triple header, which we used to see back in the day at the Palestra. But this is more so a tournament. And for the first time, Drexel University is now a member of the Big 5. So that's going to be interesting to cover, and we'll just see how that experience goes to try to revive. It's an effort from all 6 schools to just try to revive the mystique and the excitement that we knew the Big Five was back in the day.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that, and look forward to talking to you again soon, OJ. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt.